Girl in Blue, written by Ella H. Carr, 1998. Let me preface this story with this. While I was an imaginative child at the time of this story, I knew at the age of 6 the difference between imaginary and reality. I had imaginary friends growing up as an only child, but I knew that they were just that, imaginary. When I was 6 years old, my mother and I lived in this house that was much bigger than the two of us needed. We called it the Big House, and still call it that to this day when talking about our time there. It was a 3-story house. The first floor was comprised of the kitchen, dining room, and living room. The second floor was 3 bedrooms and a bathroom, and the third floor was just one large room. That was my room. It doubled as a bedroom and a playroom because of the size. My room had 2 little cubby doors, one open to a small storage space, the other my mom could never get to open. It had a small oval knob and a keyhole, like one of those keyholes that were meant for one of those skeleton keys. This is relevant later. I was not only an only child, but I also had no neighborhood kids to play with, no cousins or family friends. I blame this fact on why I'm still socially awkward, but I digress. Up until this particular sunny day, there had not been any unusual activity in the Big House. I am now 33, and yet the memory of this day is still so clear. I had just got my first ceramic tea set. The set was a creamy white with a delicate pink flower hand-painted on each piece of the set, even the tiny spoons. I'd gathered my 2 favorite childhood toys, a rag doll named Rattle and a bear with a clown hat named Snuffy. I'd snuck down to the bathroom and filled a teapot with water, and I was fixin' to have my first official tea party. I sat in front of the window where the sunbeams landed on the floor. It wasn't fall, and the spots where the sunbeams hit were always the warmest. I had been playing with Snuffy and Rattle for about 10 minutes when I realized, while looking down at the tea set, across from me were a pair of light blue shoes. It happened gradually. It's not like they popped into existence. It's more like when you're looking somewhere else, so your brain just doesn't register what you're looking at right away. Like that. As I looked up, I saw a girl. She was right about my age, with copper hair and knee-length blue dress, with lace around her neck and a hemline. She wore a silver locket around her neck and the blue shoes I had seen first. For some reason, I wasn't scared. I just asked if she wanted to have some tea. She nodded and sat in front of me. It was only years later that I fully realized that she made absolutely no noise doing so. I don't know how long we played. She never spoke, just nodded or shook her head. The only noise she made was a peal of laughter. It was after this laughter that I heard my mother open the door at the foot of my stairs. She called up, "What are you doing up there? I can hear you squealing all the way down in the kitchen." When my mother had opened the door, I had jumped back and looked over my shoulders towards the door. When I turned back to look at the girl, she was gone. Her teacup was still full. Snuffy had fallen over, but nothing else had moved. "Just playing with my tea set, Mama," I called down the stairs, still staring at the empty space in front of me. Again, I was more confused than scared. That is, until I heard a squeaking hinge coming from behind me. I whipped around looking for the sound, and there it was. The door to the cubby that I had watched my mother trying for hours to open was open. It was open just an inch. That's it. An inch. I sat there for what felt like an hour, just staring. Part of me was waiting for a monster to come out. It felt weird. My little mind couldn't figure out what had just happened. I debated yelling for my mom. I thought maybe just cry. Finally, I gathered the courage to slowly walk towards the little cubby door. Inside was a very tiny space, maybe 3 feet by 3 feet and 4 feet high. There were some old newspapers and debris from the years of being untouched. Then I saw a small ring on the floor, not like one you wear, more like an old door knocker. I pulled it. As it opened, I heard something slide across the hatch. Once the hatch was opened, I looked down into the little door. I was looking down into my bathroom linen closet. I laughed. Even at the age of 6, I realized I had been spooked by a cubby that had just had a secret door to the bathroom. As I was looking down, I heard my mother come into the bathroom. So I waited for her to pass the closet, and I yelled, "Boo!" I swear she almost fainted. She opened the closet and started, "You little," but she trailed off. From above, I watched her looking all around the lower shelves of the closet, which made me giggle. She looked up in surprise, which caused me to slam the little hatch closed. As it closed, I saw what had slid off the hatch. It was a silver locket. Moments after I'd closed the hatch, my mom was running up the stairs yelling my name. She asked me how I'd opened it. So I told her what I just told all of you. I remember the dumbfounded look she had at the end as I held up the silver locket, slightly tarnished and covered in dust. After that, weird stuff happened all the time in that house. We would wake up in the morning with every kitchen cabinet open, the water turned on, far away sounding giggling, the washer starting with no one near it. Nothing that bothered my mom, strangely. I kept the necklace until I lost it in 5th grade. I never saw the girl again. I had seen one other aberration, ghost, spirit, or whatever you want to call it, in our basement the same month we moved. My mother and I lived in this house alone. Keep that in mind. I wanted to blow bubbles, and the giant jug of bubbles was kept on the basement stairs. I went to go get it, and when I bent down to grab them, I could see our washer and dryer. Standing in front of them was a tall, balding man with black hair, a half-unbuttoned plaid shirt, and what appeared to be black dress pants. When I saw him, he looked directly at me, and then he was gone. I have a few more weird stories from the big house. Maybe I'll share them later. Until then, have a good spooky season, everyone. There's Something Behind the House. Written by U/Big Country Red, 1993. These events happened 4 years ago. I'll start off by saying my name is Alan, and my best friend's name is Matt. Matt and I had been friends for several years at this point. Matt's dad usually let us do whatever we wanted. I normally went to Matt's house and partied every Friday night. We were in our early 20s in a crap-hole small town in southern Tennessee. So what better things were there to do besides getting messed up? The older Matt and I got, the more we realized we loved paranormal investigation shows. We shared experiences we had as children. The more we talked, the more we built our egos up, as if we wouldn't be scared of anything, as future paranormal investigators. Matt's family moved across town, and I spent the day/evening helping them move. It was late spring, early summertime, so it was hot enough for us to sit on the porch all night. One evening, we decided to have a bonfire and drink a beer. Around 8 p.m., we put the fire out and Matt's dad left. Being big guys, we had gotten hot and took our shirts off. We were watching TV in the living room when we heard Matt's dog, Sparky, barking towards the back of the house. Matt went back to the living room and I followed. The barking continued to get louder with anger and fear. I asked Matt what the F could he be barking at. We found him a few feet off the back door snarling at the door. We got a bit concerned and thought maybe this is something. I asked Matt if his dad knew anything about the house. He said no, but I had brought my camera, so he cracked a smile and said, "Let's investigate." We went through the house doing everything we'd seen on the ghost TV shows. We got nothing in the house. I said, "Sparky was barking at the back. Let's go look out back." We took our belts off and held them like they're some kind of defensive weapon. When presented with a real-life situation, those egos we had shriveled up like raisins. I told him to take the back corner of the house, and covering me as I ran to the unattached shed's back wall. It was about midnight in the small backyard connected with the woods, so it was pitch black dark. I had gotten gutsy, so I started imitating that famous ghost hunter Zach. "If you have any balls, show yourself," I shouted. And then I proceeded to say, "Don't be such a sissy." No sooner than the words came out of my mouth, I felt a presence come up on me. It hit me with the force hard enough to knock my 6'4", 300-pound butt back 10 feet. At this point, Matt had already took off running. I jumped up and looked behind me. I saw the outline of a dark entity, at least my height, with glowing yellow eyes looking at me out of the tree line. I was frozen as we made eye contact. It was as if it was trying to eat me through my eyes. I snapped out of the frozen state when I heard Matt shout, "Bro, run!" I hopped to my feet as it glided towards me and ran to the front door. I rounded the front porch so fast I had to grab to the porch support post to spin around on the porch. We hid in Matt's room till his dad returned home. We told his dad what had happened, and he went on to tell us about the previous tenant and the land. He had recently found out that not only did the guy that lived there die in the back room, but also practiced weird rituals on the land. We made it through the night, but I never again felt comfortable there. It was as if I was being watched like a hunter watching its prey. They moved again not long afterwards, and I always try to avoid the road that the house is on. The Thing with White Eyes. Written by U/DeathToll21. From the age of 13 till the age of 16, I had several experiences that I could not explain. During the time I lived in an old one-story gray house near a railroad that, for as long as I could remember, has always been strange and never felt comfortable to be in. It always felt tense in there, whether it was the constant chaos that occurred in the house or the paranormal. Who knows, but it didn't help. I had heard footsteps a lot and heard whispers, but always thought it was just my imagination, because I wasn't a believer in ghosts or anything. But the thing that was in my room was not my imagination. It was 3:30 in the morning, and I was sleeping, but wasn't too deep into a sleep, as I was still audibly aware, as I came to find out by hearing a blood-curdling scream directly into my ear, as if someone put their mouth right next to my ear and screamed directly into it. I jolted awake, thinking it was my niece or my mother, who was sleeping in the room just down the hallway a little bit. I sprang out of bed to check on them, and found them both sleeping despite the scream, and thought I was just losing it. My mom was snoring, so it was not like I could have heard my niece anyways. I started to go back to my room, and when I thought I walked through my bedroom door, I saw a black shadow figure sitting on my bed, looking at where I was sleeping. It turned and looked at me with pure white eyes. No iris or pupil, nothing. Just a featureless silhouette of a person with white eyes. I thought I was seeing things. I ignored it and tried to get to my bed, only to have the thing stand up and walk towards me, silently, and meet me about halfway from my bed to the door, which was about 3 feet away, and stares right at me. As I start to make this connection of what I'm seeing, it starts to fade away. After I blinked, it was gone. I started to feel a little on edge, as I had no idea what the heck I had just seen, but tried to comfort myself thinking it was nothing more than just a dark shadow messing with my mind. As I tried to get back to sleep, I could have sworn I heard scratching on the walls, but didn't want to freak myself out any further, so I didn't think about it, and drifted off to sleep. The following morning, I asked my niece if she had a nightmare, and woke up screaming. She said no, that she didn't have a nightmare at all. I told them what had happened, excluding seeing the figure thing, so not as to make myself sound crazy, as my mom isn't a believer, and my niece was little at the time. My mom said it was nice that I checked on her, and that she said that if she had been screaming, she would have heard her. I should feel assured by this, but it just creeps me out even more because I think at this point I no longer thought that the figure was just a shadow playing tricks on me. I think it was a spirit or perhaps a demon. In the coming years, I would find that I was not the only one who had experiences in that house. My sister claims to have seen an old woman dart into her room, and her face had been seen in the glass doors that sat in front of the old fireplace in the living room. She was the landlady's mother that lived in the house before we did, and sadly died there. We have since moved from that house and all activity had stopped. I sometimes wonder if it followed us to the new house, but the whole vibe of this house is different. No signs of anything paranormal. It has been 7 years, but I can say that without a doubt that my old house was strange. A Deep Woods Residual Haunting, written by Myuu/the Zoid 5000. Back in the early 2000s, I had been walking my dog through a large wooded area in my hometown of Missouri. I came across a walking path that seemed seldomly used, so I thought, why not? So as I'm walking down this path, I come across a cliff with about a 30-foot drop into what looked like an old lake bed. The cliff was a large horseshoe shaped and the bed was very rocky. Out in the center I saw what looked like a very large rock circle with a pentagram in the center. I thought to myself, I need to remember how I got here and come back at night and see if I can catch a ritual happening or something. Fast forward a year later, a childhood buddy and I were hanging out with a college friend of mine, and we were looking for something to do on Saturday night. It was July and I lived in a college town, so there were not that many parties going on. None that we wanted to go to anyways. And the bar scene wasn't the same when school was out. All of a sudden I had the bright idea of, hey, I found this thing way back in the woods. We should go check it out. So armed with flashlights, we headed out into the night. Now, here is where the story takes a turn, because we never made it to our destination. We were walking down a trail fairly deep into the woods. It was about 1 a.m. and we began to notice that things had gotten very quiet. No bugs, no frogs, nothing. Up ahead of us, about 50 yards away, I noticed what looked like something standing near a tree, right where the trail starts to curve to the right. To be honest, it just looked like a black mass, but it was so tall, much like a person, so I just assumed that's what it was. I went to point my flashlight at it to see who it was or what it was, but as soon as I raised it, my flashlight went out. I looked at the flashlight confused, because it just had brand new batteries in it. I then looked up ahead at the mass just in time to see it streak across the path and into the woods at what looked like the speed of light. My buddies and I just looked at each other for a moment, and then up ahead towards the tree, unsure of what we just witnessed. We moved on, despite my college buddy's pleas. He was from South Africa and not being used to being in the woods. I told him, we didn't come all this way to turn back now. We got up to where the mass had been and began hearing something running across what sounded like loose rocks. I assumed we had startled some deer in the nearby creek area and they were running off. The problem is, the sound never faded. It was like the deer were running in place. After a minute or so of listening to this, we decided that it was best to head back to the car. Things were just getting too weird. Now fast forward another couple of weeks, and I'm sitting in the parking lot after a work softball game, telling this story to some coworkers. One of the managers who lived in this area his whole life looked at me and said very matter-of-factly, "You know what that was that you heard, don't you?" I said, "No, what?" He began to tell me that the area had been a part of a nearby rock quarry in the early 1900s, and that there had been a couple of occurrences where blasting caps had gone off prematurely. He said, and I'll never forget this, what you heard were those men trying to run out of the area before being buried alive. It makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up even now, because thinking about it, it's exactly what it sounded like. And that black mass? I can only guess that it was also a worker, running for his life before being crushed by a falling rock. I've gone back out there a couple of times over the years, but have never heard that sound again. But that's okay, because it's a sound that has been burned into my memory, and one that I'll never, ever forget. Being Tested. Written by u/snoodoodle6576. This is a paranormal experience I had that I feel I should share. When I was 13, I lived with my mom in a deeply wooded, quiet neighborhood in Tallahassee, Florida. This was back in 2008, around late August. My dad and older brother had been living together in Dallas, Texas for about 4 months, and my dad extended a weekend invitation to my mother and I. I, being a greasy loner, addicted to playing Halo 3 and watching anime, politely weaseled my way out of the visit and told my mom that she should go, as I was more than man enough to watch the house and cats for 5 days alone. I was homeschooled at the time, and the idea of having the house to myself for a few days was exhilarating. So my mom took the flight out to Dallas, and I slithered about the house half naked, snacking and gaming and greatly enjoying myself for the first 2 days or so. So, something to be said about my old house is that it's always had an indescribable eeriness to it, especially from the outside. The heavy foliage and humidity of Florida had eaten away at the old blue paint, surrounded by 3 massive ancient mossy oak trees. I've always been into the paranormal. That house was always a spur of my fascination. On the 3rd day, I had temporarily exhausted my interest in gaming, or otherwise gluing my eyes to a TV screen. I was playing with my cat Elvis while doing laundry. Our washer/dryer was located in a little cutout in the hallway, with wooden sliding doors. On a bored impulse, I popped Elvis up on a dryer lid, closed the wooden sliding doors, and leaned back on the couch, thinking it would be funny to see him stick his paws through the wooden slats. And just like that, not 3 seconds later, both old, heavy wooden doors slammed open. Both of these doors were on a track and could only slide left or right. I stared vacantly at what I'd just seen. Elvis clambered up on a shelf above the dryer. Tail and fur bristled. I don't need to explain that a house cat couldn't just part these huge doors like the Red Sea. I slowly walked up to Elvis and calmed him down. I wanted to chalk this up to the paranormal, but it just seemed so strange. If there'd been some type of spirit in the house, it chose this way to show its presence. That night, it was around 2 or 3 a.m., and I decided it was time to get some sleep. This was early for me at that age. My room was always stuffy and hot, so at night I would open my window. And given that I was home alone, I kept the bedroom door open. Being a paranoid turd that I was, the hallway light was always on. It being late summer, the tree frogs, bullfrogs, and the cicadas played their song all night from the dank pond in her backyard. I had gotten used to it as a form of Florida white noise. Elvis and George, my 2 cats, were asleep at the foot of my bed, with me on my side facing the wall. I'd begun to drift off to sleep about 15 minutes of lying still. Then, like hitting a switch, every cricket and creature outside had gone silent. I opened my eyes and stared at the dimly lit wall, confused. I craned my head up and stared out my window, hearing only the whirring sound of my ceiling fan. Both cats still asleep. I brushed it off and laid my head back down. About 30 seconds later, from directly behind me, a sound that will always haunt me. A low, clicking growl. My heart caught in my throat, and I slowly opened my eyes, staring at the wall in dumbfoundment of what I had just heard. I remained calm, as losing my cool in a potentially terrifying situation was not in the cards. I couldn't afford to let my imagination or my adrenaline get the better of me. I had to rationalize. There's no way that there was something behind me. There's nothing that can make that kind of sound. Without craning my neck, I peered at the foot of my bed, at my cats. They were awake now. Elvis groggily looked around the room, ears back. George had his eyes locked on something, directly behind me, and was gazing upwards. Again, I couldn't freak out. That would only make things worse. I had to dismiss this. The growl came again, lower and closer. I wish I could explain the sound. Think of the Grudge and the Predator put together, but slow it down and make it shorter. Yeah, that sound. Directly behind me, in this empty house. That was it for me. I could barely breathe, but did my best to calm myself. It took me about an hour of staring at the wall to find the courage to close my eyes and to try to forget about the whole thing. I think what calmed me was hearing the slow croaking of bullfrogs and chirping of crickets again. Come the morning, I acted as if nothing had happened. I had to. I had to live here after all. I couldn't give power to such a thing by entertaining the idea of it, especially not with my sweet mother and cats living here as well. She came home a few days later. I never told her about anything about the house being potentially haunted, or having some type of skinwalker lurking about. Thankfully, things were relatively quiet from then on. All sorts of nightmarish paranormal things wouldn't happen to me for another 9 years, but that's a different story for another time. Followed by an invisible humanoid, written by Myuu/spawnofspace. I was 13 years old in Lake Orion, Michigan, visiting my mom's friends and their kids for the 4th of July weekend. This event in particular happened on the 4th, after the fireworks and the families were with their light-up hats and glow-in-the-dark jewelry had made their way home, and their partiers were making their way to a second location to finish out the night. It was at this time that me and my friend, along with my mom's friends' kids, had the city to themselves. We were really just out roaming around, walking down some residential roads outside of the downtown area. It was really quiet and dead out, probably around 2 a.m. No cars driving around, just that really calm, peaceful time at night. Hooligans can run wild. My mom's friend's kid wanted to ding-dong ditch some houses, but I was kind of a straight-edge kid, and this made me a bit nervous, but I went along with it. We had ding-dong ditched probably 5 houses at this point, and the kids started pressuring me to do it. That it was my turn. Don't be such a wussy type stuff. So they directed me to ring the doorbell of this house that we were standing in front of. It was a smaller white house, square-shaped, some metal fencing around the back for the owner's dog. I walked up to the concrete path to the front door, illuminated by an outdoor light on the corner of the house. Then, up the concrete steps to find that there was no doorbell. So I walked back. I explained that there was no doorbell, thinking that this would get me out of the task of ding-dong ditching. I didn't get off that easy and was told to just knock then. So, as someone who didn't want to kill the fun, I went back, opened the screen door, and knocked, to find that they had already taken off running. I ran after them, and I didn't know if I believed what they were saying, but even my friends said that they saw it. Apparently there was a face in the window the first time I went up, and the house was notoriously haunted. I could go into more detail, but the house is not the story that I've come to tell. At this point I was a little spooked and out of breath. We must have run about half a mile. I looked behind me, on guard, a bit after being told what they had seen in the house. I saw this figure that I'd always described as looking made out of water. A humanoid figure, translucent, that makes the background behind them wavy, and has a defined outline, under a streetlight on the sidewalk about 50 meters back. I figured my mind was playing tricks on me, because I was already spooked and just kept walking, joking around with the others, looking back every so often. It was following us, and I could see it staying a distance but keeping up pace, keeping to the sidewalk. My mom's friend's kid that wanted to ding-dong ditch the houses looked to see what I was looking at, exclaiming to his friend, "Did you see that?" and took off running. My friend looked back and took off running with them, and I was again left running after them. We all ran back to his house, probably about 3 miles, never looking back, until we could see his driveway. No sign of it behind us anymore. It's crazy how far and how fast you can run with adrenaline like that. I've never been so shook or scared my entire life. I was inconsolable. It really shook my entire being. I was scared for a while that I would see it again, and found out that it had been following me this entire time. At night I still look over my shoulder, behind me obsessively. It had been over 10 years now, and I've never seen anything like that again, and I've never been able to find any other encounters like it. Searching the internet.